Somehow, I always knew that Sarah Schuler's and Larry Edge's father had done something real special in World War II. I did not know what it was, so I asked Larry. Larry told me, and Larry directed me to the book Hellcats for more details. I found and bought a copy of the book Hellcats, read it, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Buckhead can rightfully and proudly boast of many World War II heroes. Commander Lawrence Lott Edge, skipper of the USS Bonefish, SS 223, is certainly one of those heroes. We are privileged tonight to have with us Peter Sashton, the author of Hellcats, Peter's wife, Karen. Stand up, Karen. And Commander Edge's children, Sarah Edge Schuler. Stand up. And Sarah's husband, Bob. And Lawrence Lott Edge Jr. and his wife, Dawn. So join me in welcoming our special guest. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank and Richard and Edmund. And I'm Larry Edge, as Frank said, and next to me is Peter Sashton. He is the author of Hellcats, and Peter is a graduate of the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. After graduation, he joined the Navy and served as on the art staff of All Hands magazine in Washington, D.C. While there, he met Karen, and after her graduation from George Washington University, they were married. After working in the design field and teaching photography at his alma mater for several years, Peter and Karen had their own graphic design studio in Philadelphia before retiring to St. Augustine, from which they drove up yesterday to join us tonight. Some of Peter's photographic work is now at the Library of Congress and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And by the way, during his retirement, he renewed really his interest in writing, and is now completing his 14th book. So he's still pretty busy at this point. I received a phone call about 2008 from a gentleman, and he said, "You don't know me, but my name's Peter Sashton, and I've written a book about my father's time on the USS Rasher during World War II, and I've always been intrigued by the story of the Bonefish." And he explained a little bit of his background, that he had written about the Rasher, and it was published by the Naval Institute, and he'd written several other books published by other large publishing companies as well. And so he said, "Do you have any information that you'd be willing to share with me about the Bonefish and its career?" Well, our mother had saved every letter that was between them from the time they were engaged until he was lost. And we had a good bit of information that she had collected. But Peter, to start off, why don't you tell us what prompted you to be interested in Hellcats?
Well, first I want to thank Richard Waterhouse, Frank Virgin, for inviting me and Karen to Atlanta to speak about Hellcats. It's indeed an honor and privilege to be here with you. I also want to thank our hosts, Larry and Dawn Edge, and Sarah Edge Schuler, and Dr. Schuler. Indeed, Karen and I feel like members of their families, and of course, we are. I was prompted to write Hellcats because in the writing of my book, Red Scorpion, about the USS Rasher, I uncovered a story I had overlooked for years. When I was very young, and my father had served in submarines in World War II, I was fascinated by what he did and his shipmates, what they accomplished, what it took to accomplish what they did in their battle against the Imperial Japanese Navy. And so I always knew there was something in the records and in the history of submarines in the Pacific. And after writing Red Scorpion, I said, let me take a look at this story about the Hellcats, Operation Barney, and the penetration of the minefields into the Sea of Japan. And Karen helped me track down the Edge family in Atlanta. And then I called him and said, you don't know me, but here I am, and what do you have that would help me write this book? And of course, they had so much information. So we came to Atlanta. They hosted us and opened up their files, and we had a chance to go over almost everything that your mother had stashed away, and it was a revelation. There was so much material in not just letters, of course, but official correspondence with the commanders in the Pacific and the post-war era. So that got me started, and without it, it wouldn't have been possible to write Hellcats. And as a matter of fact, Larry even said to me one day, he said, well, Mom put all this away thinking maybe someday somebody would come along, want to write a book or want some information, and I said, well, that time has come.
And there was a book that was already written
Yes.
Previously in the 50s, I guess.
Yes, Admiral Charles Lockwood, who was the commander of submarines Pacific during World War II. He was known affectionately as Uncle Charlie. His skippers and crews all worshipped him. After the war, he wrote a book called Hellcats of the Sea. And he told the story of the Hellcat mission entirely from his perspective as the commander of submarines, not personalized with the various crews, skippers, and so forth. I believe shortly after there was a movie made of that book starring Ronald Reagan and Nancy Davis.
It happened to be the only movie that they starred in together about that mission. what was the information? Give us a little more detail on the information that you found helpful.
Well, it was the letters that were written from Commander Edge to his wife before and after Operation Barney, his love for his family, his crew, and he really opened his heart to tell us what it was like to be in a combat zone where the chances of survival, even though most submariners did, were in question. But the other parts that you had, your mother had, that were very important were the official correspondence from Commander Submarines Pacific regarding the development of the, and we'll talk about this in a moment, the sonar system that allowed them to make the penetration through the minefields by being able to detect the mines themselves, and what it took to do that, both in reconnaissance missions and then the mission itself. But the technical matters that would be very, very hard to come by any other way, Sarah Edge had correspondence that was invaluable.
She also had letters from after the submarine was lost. Being the skipper's wife, she had all of the crew families writing letters to her to learn more details as well.
That's right. She had voluminous correspondence from the members of the Bonefish crew, all 85 of them, who perished on that mission. She became the centerpiece for the investigation and dissemination of information, well, what little they knew at the time about what happened. But all of that, too, added another dimension to Hellcats, and that was the post-mission examination of what happened, why it happened, and most importantly, was what happened, the loss of a submarine, worth the mission itself? Were the results of the mission worth having lost the submarine?
How did you organize the book, Peter? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I tried to organize it starting with the very personal side of Sarah and Lawrence's life together. The second part, of course, is the role submarines played in the Pacific theater during World War II. And then the last part, as I said, was the examination or the questions that arose after the mission and the loss of the Bonefish. How did it happen? Why did it happen? And how the mission was approved given the chances of its outright failure. And there's no question, there was grave doubt about the mission succeeding at all. Of course it did. Nevertheless, we lost the submarine. But those three parts of it were the structure I used to build the story and personalize it with Lawrence and Sarah. Now, as I said, Admiral Lockwood's book dealt mostly with the technical and operational matters, and so does Hellcats. But I felt there was an obvious element that had been left out, and that was the personal side of their lives.
Well, by way of background, why don't you tell us a little bit just of the significance of the U.S. submarine force during the war in the Pacific?
Well, when the war broke out, the doctrine for submarine operations was, of course, to defeat, sink, and destroy as much as the submarines could of the Imperial Japanese Navy, their warships. But it soon became obvious that the way to defeat Japan was to destroy their merchant marine. And so the submarines in the Pacific, while they sank some warships, concentrated on the destruction of the merchant marine. And the proof of how effective that could be was the U-boat operations in the North Atlantic. The German U-boats sank so much Allied shipping, it almost brought Great Britain to its knees and dried up the shipment of arms, food, and other necessities between the United States and Great Britain. And another factor is that, unlike the United States, which had a very robust shipbuilding program, the Japanese could not replace their ship losses as fast as they were sunk. So in time, their merchant fleet was diminished, and I think U.S. submarines probably sank almost 2,000 Japanese merchant ships.
I think one interesting thing to the submarines in the Pacific, of the 250 or so submarines, 50 of those were sunk. Probably one of the highest casualty rates in the Pacific, at least in the Navy, if I'm not mistaken. Is that?
Well, they said so, and not comparable to what the 8th Air Force suffered in their bombing campaign over Germany. But yes, 52 submarines were lost, and full crews generally were lost with them. So they paid a high price. But Admiral Lockwood believed that a submarine raid, after the successes of destroying the Japanese merchant marine in the Western Pacific, that a raid into the Sea of Japan to destroy what was left of the merchant marine, lugging cargo from China, Korea, and even parts of Russia to the home islands in Japan, would bring the war to an end faster than, and without the need for an invasion by American forces that would likely end with thousands, 100,000 or more casualties on the American side, not to diminish the number of casualties on the Japanese side who vowed to fight to the death.
How did the mission become to be called Barney, Operation Barney?
Well, Lockwood had an operations officer in Pearl Harbor named Barney Sigloff. And Lockwood was, of course, occupied with all of the other operations going on in the Pacific, seeing about, and by the way, they had a torpedo problem. The torpedo is, of course, the submarine's main weapon. And they had unsolvable problems for years with the magnetic exploders and so forth. So Lockwood was occupied with those things, and so he said to his operations officer, take over this mission to the Sea of Japan, and he named it Operation Barney.
Some of you may know Woody White, but Woody White served, and he's not in town tonight, but at any rate, he served in the Navy and became a good friend of Barney Sigloff. So just an interesting side of this. But that's how it was named. But tell us about the sonar system that the U.S. had at the time and the problems with it.
Well, submarines, of course, they were equipped with sonar, which allowed them to target some ships that they were targeting, or they often used it to probe the bottom of waterways, shallow waterways where they were in. But it wasn't a tool that was used like the Japanese used it against American submarines. The Japanese had a sonar system that they would use to send out a pulse that would hit the hull of a submarine, and it would return. And once they had done that several times, they could find the position of the submarine and then bring in depth charges, which are depth bombs, to destroy the submarine. So because of the limitations of conventional submarine sonar, they needed a new system that would detect these mines that are attached to cables. They're anchored on the sea bottom, and the mine floats below the surface. And they have contact points on them. If a ship touches them, contacts them, they explode and, of course, destroy the ship. So they had to have a way to detect where those mines were, and the Navy had a research office in California, and there the scientists developed an FM, frequency modulated sonar system, based on what they had developed to locate schools of fish for the fishing industry. And they modified it and turned it into the FM sonar that was installed in submarines so that they could detect the floating or the cabled mines.
And they really didn't have that developed until late in the war.
It was very late in the war, yes.
And really was the end of what, 44, early 45?
Early 45. And beyond all that, it didn't always work as it was supposed to. And so they had to work out the bugs. They had problems with it. They weren't sure it was going to work at all. And the system, when it was in use, they had a cathode ray screen that would show the position of the mines as pairs on a cable. And when they got close to the mines, a gong would sound or a bell would sound, and the intensity of the bell told them how close they were to a mine. And of course, the crews called it Hell's Bells. But that's how they worked it out, and it took weeks, if not months, of development to develop the system to a point where they could trust it and put it into operation. And then, of course, they sent several submarines on recon missions to try to map the mines in the sea, outside the Sea of Japan, to see if it worked at all and get an idea where the mines were, that they would, the outer parts of the minefields.
Commander Edge was a part of Operation Barney. Tell us a little bit of the background of him and his role in the war.
Well, he was dedicated, he was aggressive, and as Lockwood said, he had all the attributes that were needed by a submarine skipper in World War II, a successful skipper, particularly aggressiveness, but he also had a manner, apparently, that made him what do I say? He was loved by his crew. He was fair to everybody. And they admired him and adored him for his handling of the crew, the ship, and his belief that a successful skipper will bring everybody back.
And he was from Columbus, Georgia,
Yes.
and he met my mother because she would go down to Columbus to visit relatives that were there, the Woodruffs and who else there? The other cousins that were there, and so after graduation, they were married. This is a picture of them about that vintage that you see. They were married and had a short time for a honeymoon, and ended up at up in Highlands for a couple of days at the home that the Ecks had, Dick and Molly Eck, if anyone knows Tony Eck. Dick and Molly were his parents. He couldn't be here tonight to defend himself, but at any rate, this is a picture of them with Dick and Molly. Molly has her back to us, but at any rate, that's in Highlands, North Carolina. What is that? Yes, he's on the right. Yeah, and Dick's is on the left. Mother's facing the camera, and so at any rate, that may be a later picture when they went back to visit, but at any rate, that's where they went. At this point, what happened when after they were married? Do you recall?
Well, Commander Edge, to step back a little bit, he was given command of the Bonefish. He was an outstanding skipper.
Before we get there,
yes.
He ended up after sub school going to Hawaii, stationed in Hawaii.
He was, yes.
So this is their duty. They were there almost 2 years in Hawaii. So that was their real honeymoon, I think. And so later, let's see, after they were there in 1943, they gave birth to someone that he called Boo. As you can see here, he was a lieutenant commander at that point. And while he was in the service, when they came back to Atlanta, she was born in Annapolis, as a matter of fact. Came back to Atlanta, and while he was away during the war, this was home. If that looks familiar to anyone, 18 Collier Road, still standing. And Peter, you began your book with talking about that.
I began the book with the delivery of the telegram from the Navy that Commander Edge was missing in action, and they didn't know whether he was alive, taken prisoner, or what his situation was, but that's where she received the telegram, and the young man who delivered it came to the door and said, "Ma'am, are you alone? There's somebody with you."
This is just a picture of typical picture of a submarine in the act of torpedoing a merchant ship in the Pacific. And this is a picture. Tell us a little bit about what went on, if you can.
Well, what they're doing, they're conferring here. The officer on the far left, that's Admiral Lockwood. That might be Barney Sigliff in the middle. But they're talking to Commander Edge. He probably just came back from a war patrol, and they wanted to know what he thought, what his experience was with that. This could have even been the recon mission that he went on to probe the minefields.
And this is another picture while in the Pacific, just a medal ceremony. And that on the left, is that Lockwood?
No, it's hard to say, but it's not Lockwood. No, it could be Barney Sigliff again. As his chief of staff, he would probably have pinned the medal on.
Good.
Excuse me, he was the operations officer.
Okay. And then in early 1944, Commander Edge received orders to be the executive officer
of the bonefish?
Of the bluefish.
Bluefish,
right?
Yeah. Yes, that's right, the bluefish.
And then subsequently assumed command in June, I think it was, of 44 of the bonefish. This was the insignia of the bonefish. This is a picture of the bonefish arriving in Fremantle, Australia after a mission.
The Navy had, pardon me, the U.S. Navy had a big submarine base in Fremantle, Australia, because they operated into the western part of the Pacific, and they could not just leave from Pearl Harbor or even Midway and Guam. So they had a base in Fremantle that the submarines in the western Pacific operated out of. So he's returning at this moment from a war patrol, a 60-day war patrol, likely. So.
And submarine duty was not very fun. Can you tell us a little bit about what was involved in serving on a submarine?
Well, submariners are a special breed. They thrive on living and working in close quarters. And with the diesel electric submarines, of course, they were breathing diesel fumes and cigarette smoke and unwashed bodies, even though they had showers and so forth. But it was tough duty. The submarines, the Gato-class submarines, were air-conditioned to a degree. But often when they were under attack, or soon under attack, they would shut down all unnecessary machinery to save battery power while submerged, and the temperature would rise 100 to 120 degrees or more in the submarine. But they endured, and once they were out of danger, or they had completed an attack, a successful attack, they would surface, clear the air out of the boat, and the lucky ones were the lookouts, who would go topside in the periscope shears with their binoculars to look for enemy aircraft or ships. They got to breathe the fresh air. The skipper went to the bridge. His officer of the deck would go to the bridge, and they had all the advantages of the nice weather up there. The guys downstairs, well, maybe they would get a good whiff now and then when they opened the hatches and fumigated the boat. But it was difficult because the patrols lasted some 60 days, sometimes even a little longer. They had the capacity for provisions. They had frozen stores, food stores, and everything that they needed. They even had a pharmacist maid aboard for injuries and so forth, but it was still very hard duty.
And at the beginning, I guess, in 1945, at the beginning, he was ordered to bring the bonefish back to San Francisco
Yes.
to be
Outfitted with,
yeah.
the bonefish came back to San Francisco, where the bonefish was outfitted with FM sonar. It took them a while to get all the bugs out of it and so forth. And when they did and they declared it seaworthy, then he went on a recon mission, much like some of the earlier ones, where they probed into the Tsushima Straits, where the mines were laid to prevent submarines from entering, and they were able to map the outer edges, and the system worked even better than they thought it would, because they provided them with a clear picture of where the mines were, not to say that they can't drift away or be changed, but they were able to locate them. And so with that, I think Lockwood felt the mission, Operation Barney, could be a success.
This is a picture in San Francisco when the submarine was being outfitted with the sonar. My father, mother, and then the officer on the far right, we believe is the executive officer of the Bonefish at the time. This will help you understand maybe where everything was. Here is Japan. This is Japan, this location. The red line shows the extent to which the Japanese penetrated the Pacific. This is the island of Midway, where they were stopped, and this is Hawaii at this point. But that gives you some idea of the reach. They even had gone as far as Attu and the Aleutian Islands, part of Alaska. I'll give you a better understanding of the scope. This is the main island of Japan and the adjoining islands nearby. And tell us a little bit about what happened here with the mission.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that despite the success they had with the FM sonar recons, Lockwood still had doubts about the chances of success. And he harbored doubts about it, and even though they looked like they probably would be successful, he thought, am I sending them on a suicide mission? Nevertheless, they felt they had to go forward with the mission, and Admiral Nimitz, who was the Chief of Naval Operations, gave them the go-ahead. What was unknown to Lockwood at the time, given the opportunity to sink the Japanese merchant marine that was bringing supplies to Japan, was that the planning for the atomic bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima was already underway, and Lockwood knew nothing of it. So the question that arose later was it the mission worth it given the relatively light payoff in sinking Japanese ships when the atomic bombing of those two cities that ended the war. So it always lingered after the war that had Lockwood known that, and many other commanders did not know it, I think even General MacArthur wasn't told about it, they might have not gone ahead with the mission at all, because they felt that they can sink all these ships, but the Japanese would fight like fanatics if they were invaded.
Well, from this map, if you can follow the cursor here, you can see this red line. This is where the ships entered into the Sea of Japan. This area to Tsushima Strait was where the mines were located that they had to work their way through. And then at the end of the mission, they exited here at La Perouse Strait, which tell us about
Well, La
that.
Perouse Strait in the north was not mined because the Russians used it to enter the Sea of Japan to reach their bases in Hokkaido and in the Sea of Okhotsk. So the Japanese did not want to mine those straits because they didn't want to have a Russian ship sunk and bring them into the war at that point because they had sunk a ship. So the U.S. Navy knew that the mines, the La Perouse Strait was mine-free, and they would use it as an escape route when the mission was over, which they did.
Tell us, we want to make sure we finish on time, but the mission started on June 6th of 1945 and concluded on June 23rd. Sarah, my mother, wrote 8 letters to my father saying, "Why haven't I heard from you?" Because usually at the end of a mission, the first thing she would do would be to send a telegram to her saying, "I'm back, everything's fine." She did not receive any letter at that point, and so tell us what did she receive?
Well, she received a telegram that her husband was missing in action, and that's all she had for the longest time. And the other families of the crews likely received telegrams too, but that's all she had until she began to inquire directly to Admiral Lockwood and Admiral Nimitz.
This is a picture of the crew at that point. My father is right here in the middle. This is the executive officer that was in the previous picture next to him. And this is the telegram that she received. And it's interesting that it says he's missing in action, but if you read down further, it says to prevent possible aid to our enemies, safeguard the lives of other personnel, don't tell anybody. And they had to say that, but that she received this telegram, let's see, about 2 weeks before I was born.
Well, the Hellcats penetrated the minefields without any casualties, disasters, what have you. And once they were in the Sea of Japan, they were able to sink Japanese ships. And the Japanese realized that somehow the American submarines had entered impenetrable waters. They must have been wondering how it was possible to do that. And they tried to hunt the submarines down with their anti-submarine units. But the other submarines, and by the way, the Hellcats were organized in 3 submarines in 3 groups of 3. There were 9 submarines in all. So they attacked Japanese shipping and even, I think, a couple small warships. And then the fated day, they received word, the Operation Hellcat commander received word that they had spotted some other Japanese shipping in Toyama Wan, which is a part of the Sea of Japan. It's like a bay, a very big bay.
It's located right here, if you can see the cursor, opposite Tokyo on the west side, and probably, I would guess, about 40 miles across at the mouth. It's a rather large bay.
And the water there is quite deep, over 1,000 feet. So Commander Edge asked permission from his pack commander. He wanted to go in and find those ships and sink them if he could. He was granted permission. He went in and never heard from again. The Hellcats were due to depart on June, as you said, June 23rd through the La Perouse Strait, and they did. One submarine stayed behind to watch for the bonefish if she were to arrive or show up damaged, needed help to exit. They were there, but of course she never did. So what happened was the bonefish was attacked by a determined Japanese anti-submarine unit. Their depth charges undoubtedly ruptured the bonefish's hull, and she flooded and sank in 1,000 feet of water, and that would have crushed the hull because those submarines could only dive to 400 feet. That was their crush depth. So,
Go ahead.
yeah, so as far as we know, that's what happened to her, and it was only later that that was confirmed.
What was the record of the subs on that mission? Do you recall? There were...
How many ships they sank?
Yeah.
No, I would have to, I can't tell you that.
I'll help you out.
Yeah, help me out.
There were 28 ships, the vessels that were sunk by the 9 submarines on that mission, for a total of 57.
See, you should have written this, not me.
For a total of 57 tons of the weight of all of those ships. The bonefish sank 2 of those for a total of 12 tons, about 20% of the total.
1,200 tons.
12,000 tons. 12,000 tons, yeah. So it was about 20% of the total of 57,000. One of those, when he was in effect ordered in, the Toyama on that bay was his area. We lost. Okay. Good. Hello? He actually sunk one of those 2 ships in the bay of Toyama, in Toyama Bay, before he was 3 destroyers converged on him because they had just chased another submarine of ours out the day before. So they were on alert when he went in there, but that was his assigned area to cover. So, did I say that right?
Yes, they were alerted to the submarines being in Toyama Wan earlier, and when the bonefish went in on her fateful operation in there, they were ready for her. They were looking for another submarine, and of course they found it.
This, let's see here. This is an article in the AJC that came out the day after I was born, when they finally were able to release what they knew at that point, that the submarine was missing. So it took 2 weeks for them to get to the point where she could say anything to anyone. And this is a picture of the type of vessel that attacked the Bonefish, a Japanese destroyer. These are the men that are on eternal patrol. Just two more slides here. This is on Grant Field, and Mother is receiving a medal, which you can tell us about what that was.
Well, she was receiving the 3rd Navy Cross awarded to Commander Edge. The Navy Cross is second in importance only to the Medal of Honor, and he received 3 of them for his heroism, his action, and she was there that day receiving it.
Well, all 3 of us were there. But this gentleman here in the middle is Captain Felix de Gaulle. So he apparently was receiving a medal at the same time. This is just the different medals that he received. This is the Navy Cross that Peter referred to. For the 2nd and 3rd, you got a star to put on the ribbon. Is all. This is what Mother was faced with afterwards, with Sarah and I standing in front of 18 Collier Road. This is a picture when I was 12 on my way to New Zealand with Jack Shields, our 7th grade teacher. Mother had set up a day at Pearl Harbor, and this is my father's picture. This wall represents officers that were lost. This was at the Officers Club at Pearl Harbor. And there was one highly classified piece of equipment that was on the Bonefish and on the Rasher and some of the other subs, but it was very classified information. And it's hard for you to tell from this picture, but that is a Coke dispenser. And my father wrote a letter to Robert Woodruff, who, if you recall, Robert Woodruff had the goal of putting a Coke in every GI's hand during the war, so even on submarines. But this is the first page of his letter. There was a 3-page letter describing the details.
Let me add that
Okay.
when they installed the Coke machine on the Dad's submarine, the Rasher, they didn't know where to put it, so they had to install it in a locker where officers and people kept their gear and so forth. Well, don't you know that the syrup leaked out of the container and filled the bottom of this locker where Captain Lawn, the skipper of the Rasher, kept his shoes, kept his gear, and it soaked into all of his personal belongings.
Well, we don't talk about those kinds of things, but but at any rate, he goes into great detail in a 3-page typed letter, thank you note to Robert Woodruff, describing how they had to separate the carbonator from the rest of the dispenser to get it installed. And this was in the crew's quarters. Here on the Bonefish, he let the crew get Coca-Colas, not just the officers now.
Well, they had a place to store it, and they took it back to the mess decks for them. But anyway, so Captain Lawn said, out.
Just some sequel to the book that Peter has written. In 1958, Mother was asked to christen the Bonefish 2, U.S. Bonefish 2. And so this, just some trivia here. This is the Bonefish 2 getting ready to be christened. It was built in the hull. They were building around this the hull of the NS Savannah, the first nuclear freighter to be built. This was at New York Shipbuilding Yards in Camden, New Jersey. And finally, the bottle broke. This is just a picture of the memorial to him on our family monument at Westview. Picture of Mother later in life. And as Peter alluded to earlier, there was a movie made of the first book by Admiral Lockwood in the 50s, black and white movie starring Ronald Reagan and Nancy Davis. But in conclusion, if I can find the page here, I'd like to read part of a letter. Let me see here. Early in 1945, Mac Tharp was killed. He was the husband of Jane Tharp, and he was Jane was a bridesmaid in the wedding of my mother and father, and he was killed on an aircraft carrier, and he had played football at Georgia Tech. He was he coached at Tech for the next 15 years after that. And then in, I think it was maybe 1942, he volunteered to go into the service during the war. And so this picture here is a picture of Jane and their daughter, Mary Mack, and the president of Georgia Tech when the plaque was unveiled there for Mac. And that, just by way of background, when my father found out about the loss of Mac, he wrote Jane a letter between his patrols. And I just want to read one paragraph from that letter, if I can get through it. I might have to let Peter help me, but he said, I guess all of us out here give some thought to dying. And we all feel, I think, that if the war brings it to us, that even though we do want to live out a long life as much as anyone, leaving early in a cause which is, after all, to us individually, one which is primarily to secure you, our wives and kids, and their kids, the kind of life that we've all known and loved in the U.S. our whole lives. If that cause should bring out death, then to say the least, it is just about the best cause for which one can die young. As a result of the sacrifice of Mac and my father and the entire crew of the Bonefish, as well as the sacrifice of all those who have served and given their lives, we are all here and have the opportunity to continue to live in a free society. And I want to thank you, Peter. Both the Edge and Schuler clans are forever grateful to you for your tireless work in writing Hellcats and just chronicling the legacy left to us by Sarah's and my father. In the process, you and Karen, as you stated earlier, have become family members. You attended Nancy's wedding. That was not prepared. Nancy won the free membership back there. So, but I didn't have a thing to do with that, I promise. But as well as our visits since then in St. Augustine and here, we thank all of you for coming to hear about the story of that he's written, and we also, I thank Sarah and Bob also for getting many of you here tonight and getting the word out. But I feel it privileged to have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about him and just about the soldiers and sailors that served at that time and ever since. We hear about them all the time. And so we want to express our appreciation to all of those who have served. And so we can open it up for questions if anyone has any questions for Peter or me. If there are any questions, we're happy to answer them. If not, that's fine. Go ahead.
No, just when you say 1,000 feet,
Yes.
is there, with modern technology and everything, is there any way to get any of the ship or anything?
Well, yes, but the Navy and the explorers who have located a number of sunken ships, warships, and submarines, they treat them as war graves. No, they wouldn't touch them, no.
Well, Larry, Peter, thank you guys so much for speaking tonight. My question is, Larry, your dad seems so young. How old was he?
He was 32 when the sub went down. Tell them about the crew, the age of the crew.
Most of the crew members were 17 to 18, 20-year-olds. And I know that in Dad's case, on the USS Rasher, their last commanding officer, Charles Nace, who went on to be a rear admiral, he was the youngest skipper in the submarine service. He was 27 years old.
We have a question here.
Yeah.
Larry, did you know most of this before Peter came and gathered all the information and organized all the letters and everything, or did you learn a lot after he went to work and researched?
Well, we lived through a lot as we were growing up, and Mother kept contact with people, friends in the Navy and so forth, and so we knew a lot because they had some close relationships there. At the same time, when Peter got us started with this, we told him about the hundreds of letters that we had and so forth. There were 157 letters from the families of the crew that were lost, and letters that Mother had written back to them to respond to each of those, as well as letters she wrote to Lockwood and Admiral Nimitz and others, because it took them from the end of July until June of the 46, almost a year, to describe, to be able to say what really happened to the sub. And so all of the families were thinking that they had maybe been captured and were in POW camps. There were all kinds of rumors that were going around. Right. And so at any rate, Peter made Sarah and me read all of those letters before we could give them to him. So we relived World War II while he was working on the letter. So it's a combination of things, I would say.
I don't mean to cut this off, but I know that we all want to get home at a decent time. I want to thank you all for coming and thank our speakers. They were incredible.